Okay, well, nice to see your smiling face back at me. I want to welcome anyone who watches this conversation. My name is James Baraz, and I'm with Thanissara, a very beloved and respected teacher, Dharma teacher, and we're going to have a conversation for these crazy times, or as Thanissara just was saying, oh, maybe you could call it conversation in the Anthropocene period, where humans are having a great deal of influence over what happens on this planet, maybe too much influence. So we can find out what the right name will be as we do this, but. Before I get into the conversation with you, Thanissara, I just want to let people who don't know about you know a bit about you.
Sure.
So if you'll settle back and hear this is your life. Thanissara was a nun in the Theravadan tradition for 12 years through the Amaravati Ajahn Chah lineage. She disrobed in the 90s. What was it?
91.
91. And she and her partner Thanissara, who also was a monk in that tradition, have been a very inspiring couple for the last 25 plus years. They started a center in South Africa, Dharmagiri, in 1996, and since the year 2000, they've been doing long-term practice there for people of a month to 3 months, and have an ongoing thriving sangha in South Africa. These days, they live in the North Bay in California, in the Sebastopol area. Probably many people watching this know Thanissara as a teacher at IMS, Insight Meditation Society, and Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and all over the world. They are authors. Thanissara has written a beautiful book, Time to Stand Up, and with Thanissara, another book, Listening to the Heart. Very inspiring books about both their own journey and also how to find the courage to make a difference in the world these days. She and Thanissara are launching an in-depth Dharma training for our times starting next September, called Sacred Mountain Sangha, and you can find out information about it now before they have the whole website, Sacred Mountain Sangha, built through their website, dharmagiri.org, dharmagiri.org. And she's a friend and somebody I really respect and have been inspired by, because you really are there on the front lines, both in South Africa and around the world, and have been really one of the leading voices for conscious engagement in our times of all the Dharma teachers in our community. You really stand out as someone who walks your talk. So it's a really great pleasure to be hanging out with you here.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. I'm really delighted to join you in this conversation. Inwardly, I feel a lot more wobbly and humble than the bio.
And that's all you today.
Yeah, and struggling like everyone to try and figure out how do we manage this meltdown we're in. So it's good to talk about it. Yeah, I'm really glad we can be here and do this.
Great, yes. And with these conversations, what I thought of doing, what I've been inspired to do is speak to all of the amazing, wonderful, wise people that I know who would be willing to have a conversation, as much from my own from my own understanding as to share with others, just how people are getting through these crazy times. So this will be just a very informal hanging out time that I'm sure I'll enjoy, and I'm sure others will enjoy, and hope you enjoy it too.
Sure. Yeah, it's always great to talk to you, James. Yeah, connect
Great.
around Dharma and around the subject that we're going to contemplate.
Great. So, as I said a little bit before we started recording this, so many conversations these days when I'm with other people, sooner or later gravitate to, oh my God, what is happening? And what's your take on it? And how do we get through it? And where are we headed? And like that. And rather than just spinning our wheels and scratching our head and biting our nails and all, I thought it might be good to, at least that's sometimes what I do, to explore just how we can not only get through it, but hold what is happening in a practice context, and be able to bring out the best in ourselves and in others, and hold some kind of an inspiring vision that helps us navigate and see the light. So I have a few questions that I thought we could just start off with. There is such both a divide in America, and it seems throughout the world, between different perspectives. As I often say, we're in a race between fear and consciousness, and not to say that we have the corner on consciousness, and those and can be just as much in fear as in consciousness in my own heart. But there are forces of greed and anger and hatred and confusion that are creating a whole lot of hurt and pain in the world. So, first question for you is, what do you do to keep perspective and to keep faith when things seem overwhelming for you? You read the news, or you hear the story, or the latest, oh, I can't believe. How do you, in your wiser moments, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a good question for all of us, because we must maintain inner balance and perspective and connection with our fundamental nature, which is luminous and reflective and connected with a living Dharma, which is resourcing and responsive. So to maintain connection with that without also shutting down and not being not being sensitive and not feeling the huge, enormous body blow, really, to this dismembering time where everything that we hold dear, or any sense of a sustainable world that we would like to have for the future generation is under threat. So it's a very profound planetary emergency that we find ourselves in the midst of, and it's very clear that it's being propelled not only by the deep forces of greed, hatred, and delusion that the Buddha pointed to, inherent within the mind itself, which we address in our meditative practice and in our Dharma practice, but is actually very deliberately being propelled by actually quite a small percentage of interests. That are operating at systemic levels. And I think this is why it's very hard to tackle, because they have control of political power, economic power, and are operating from a very deeply desensitized, uncompassionate, unempathetic place, where their main agenda is this oligarchic, power-driven supremacist, white supremacist, divisive agenda is really, devastating. But it's only really being generated and allowed and perpetuated by a smaller percentage of people, in a very deliberate way. And those people have it seems a lot of hatred, really, and a lot of lack of connection, that they feel that even though billionaires who already own, I think it's 90% of the world's wealth, perhaps even more, they feel they don't have enough.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So, it's completely shocking is how do we get to this state? So we're looking at systems. And of course, as individuals, when we come up against a machinery and a system that is so unconscious and so deliberately destructive, then one can feel completely footless and completely disempowered. So I think the first thing is to remember is that the majority of peoples are actually good people that aren't being driven in that way. That, majority of people are just wanting to get along, wanting to live a good life, or wanting to are ethical or responsible. And then there's also within that there's a vast majority of people that are actually challenging and waking up to this degradation that's going on, and that are fighting for a sustainable future, and that is growing. Mm-hmm. So I suppose in terms of how I hold all of this at a deeper level is to understand it's ultimately an evolutionary process, I believe, that we're in. Mm-hmm. And that in some ways the depth of the shadow that's happening, that's a sort of going across the globe, and that's energizing these very divisive forces, is actually energizing a depth of awakening at the same time. So it is, as you said, it's kind of a battle, really. And that battle is happening at every level of our planetary experience. But at the depth of that is consciousness. It is a battle around how we actually understand reality. And it is a challenge or a crisis of consciousness, that we've been in a very separative consciousness for millennia. Where there's a subject and object, and between that, this whole dance of fear and desire and owning and grasping, a sort of colonial appropriation of assets, the oppressions of peoples. That's an old story. But I believe what's happening in the midst of the extremity of that now, where our very survival is under threat if we continue along that trajectory, is that actually we're having or being fast forwarded into a deep awakening around actually the actual nature of reality, which is a seamless whole. It's a non-divisive reality. As Thich Nhat Hanh would say, we're here to awaken out of our separateness. And that completely changes the game. And this is what awakening is, and this is the business you and I are in, and that we're being fast forwarded into, not only as a sort of in our meditation spaces away from the big bad world, but actually in the heart of it all. The world is no longer out there, it's crashed in. Mm-hmm. And is unavoidable, as you say. All the sort of despair and sweating and crying and wailing about this, what's going down is actually, it's actually a sort of outcome of what's been going on for actually a long time. So Trump and so on is a sort of product of a process. Mm-hmm. And in some ways is a distraction from this systemic level of degradation. So I think first of all we have to understand that when we move into, it's not to say we don't hold skillful boundaries, therapeutic understanding. Sometimes if there's abuse, you have to hold a boundary and say, this is not appropriate, and I'm not going to be in contact with these people or this situation. Mm-hmm. And that can be done very skillfully. It can be done without hatred and anger, but it can be done from strength and clarity. Mm-hmm. But this other energy you're talking about, the deliberate inflaming of division and hatred, has impacted us all. And it's gone into families, it's gone into communities, it's gone into the Sangha, People get very, very heated. We all get very heated about our perspective. And I think it's always useful to remember to pick your battles. What is really important in this relationship? I mean, I've had this with friends that have voted contrary to what I vote, or hold a different view, or like in the UK where I'm from, voted differently around Brexit in terms of how I would see things. And it's not just like it used to be, like, you just sort of vote a bit differently. This almost feels like a life and death struggle. And in some ways it kind of is. But what I really had to think about some of these relationships, what is important here? Is it important that I just completely blow up the whole relationship over the politics of what's happening? Or is the relationship more important? And therefore, and I really, when I could feel, like we all do, feel that sense of dismay or upset or anger or wanting to push away. And then realizing, actually, I'm not going to be hijacked by this force to demolish relationships that have been very dear to me, very important, or family, very for my whole life. So that sometimes with some friends I've agreed, let's just not talk about this, and then we have other areas. Or sometimes we do, and it gets very impassioned. But to know that actually that we have a deeper connection. And so this has helped me sort of, really think about how to skillfully, or when we teach, say in Tennessee, where we have a group, because Thanissara's from Tennessee, and that's a red state, and and it's a culturally GOP state, and people that would have a different political perspective, or friends that might carry guns, which I growing up in England, I would it's baffling to me, but it's a very American thing. So just to actually realize that we have a lot more in common than these sort of stances, and that this division, if I take it into the heart and hold hatred and then push people out, then I'm actually adding to that same energy, and we can't afford to do that. And yet there are definitely times when it's important to say no. I would stand up to I would definitely put a line around these kinds of behaviors, or these kinds of people are coming into the town as Nazis or white supremacists, or they're threatening threatening violence. And it's definitely a time to stand up and say this is not acceptable, and to lobby your senators, and to support legal processes to maintain civil rights, and so on and so on. And so it's not to be foolish, but to actually discern those differences, places where we walk those lines.
Now, let me just ask, following up on that, there are those people who might have a different perspective from you, and as you say, there's still that relationship that you want to maintain, because there's a goodness that you see in them, and that's not so different from you. And then there are those people who are the ones in power, or the ones who are breeding hatred as the way they know to feel alive and to get what they want. And I'm wondering, with those, I've been reflecting on the Buddha's words, and Martin Luther King said something very, very similar about hatred never ceasing by hatred. Hatred only ceases by love. This is an ancient and eternal law. How, in your own heart, do you keep from responding with hatred or ill will with people who are intentionally, knowingly hurting others in one way or another through power or through propagating othering and hate.
Well, I don't think, it's not that I haven't felt, profound aversion.
Profound aversion is different than hatred.
Hatred has this feeling of something you dwell on. To feel dislike, to feel hate, can be a healthy reaction. It's like an immune system. It's when you're, to feel anger, when something is overwhelming your boundaries, that's a natural reaction. But when it turns into dwelling in hatred, then, as Mr. Mandela said, it's like, if you continue hating, it's like, he said this as he left prison, if you drink poison, it's like drinking poison, hoping it will kill your enemies. I mean, for a start, it's not smart because it poisons your system and you become less effective. So I think the hatred and the aversion and the anger is a sort of red light going off saying something's really wrong. And we need to pay attention here. And that red light's screaming, all the time because of this energy is being deliberately stimulated by powerful forces, through the media, through the manipulation of that media, through, like we've seen in terms of the voting processes that happened, and, through social media, through sort of deliberately putting out false stories, through sort of this kind of energy. And I found myself, participating in some of these sort of online wars, around rhetoric and, particularly around the election processes. And then beginning to feel it gets to be useless at a certain point. It's like being in an echo chamber and a sort of shadow boxing match. It's not that effective. And you land up feeling upset and, disgruntled and angry. And at the end of the day, you don't need that energy. But you do need to have some clarity and some focus to really consider how can I and we respond effectively. And particularly if it's we, to realize when you're working with systems, it's not about I so much, it's really about we, that we have to be a collective response. And that's partly why I wrote the book Time to Stand Up, because of realizing that the Buddhist community, the mindfulness community, Dharma community, yoga communities are huge resourced communities. And we've sort of approached awakening, all of us, and myself included, as a sort of personal journey. But the Sangha is a sort of a support background, but not really understanding ourselves as as really engaging and offering something at a systemic level, at a political level, as a voice, as a lobby, as representing our values. So it was, to understand that maybe if we're going to have to take on forces that would destroy the whole planet, and we should make no mistake about it, that is actually what's happening, and that some of this consciousness is so denuded from any humane empathy that they would rather take down and destroy everything before they actually let go of their power. Then we have to actually really consider, shouldn't we be responding by a collective naming and standing for the values that we hold dear, a sustainable world for future generations, for the right for all to belong and have the support that they need, through social programs, through civil rights, through just laws, and so on. These are the things that we all hold dear through compassionate society. Not just through a sort of a mean streets kind of dog eat dog kind of society. So to understand that we to get over our personal reactions and to use those energies to mobilize, really, to use anger to turn it to clarity and focus, and and as been happening a lot in the Dharma community, perhaps not enough or speedy enough, but to really think about how to get out together on the streets, how to lobby legally, how to lobby politically, and through these very channels, how to put together retreats where we really look at these issues. That to me is more effective in terms of how we can respond, just getting caught in the spiral of aversion.
Let me ask, just going in a little deeper, when you do get outraged and frustrated and that intense aversion understandably is activated, how do you personally access a wise response and attitude towards those people in power who are hurting others? Just if you could describe your own process, like, God damn, what? How do you come back to a place of wiser, more connected response?
Well, it's sometimes it's like in the when you're cultivating samadhi, samatha samadhi, focus, calm, meditation. Sometimes there's a skill in actually training attention not to stay with that which is negative. So sometimes I realize the role of media and the role of what's going on can be very toxic. So sometimes it's a case of actually, can I, like maybe I don't really feel that, my system's very sensitive and very porous. So sometimes I have to be quite careful about how much I actually absorb. So to take attention away, I know this is going on, but to not to have to catch every detail and every blow. So just the skill of the samadhi practice, and that is a way of regrouping, to come to your own breath, your own body, your own reality, your own core, your own sense of inner strength and health. Because a lot of this will sabotage that. You can feel literally, in a therapeutic term, there's a term, transmarginal stress, which is a term that means when you're overly activated by triggers, and particularly if you've come from a situation where you either in a marginal community that has experienced a lot of trauma, or you have a lot of trauma in your system for various reasons of abuse or whatever, that you can easily be triggered into a transmarginal stress, which means there's a flood and an overwhelm. And then you're not just dealing with the momentary experience, you're actually triggering the felt sense experience of deep patternings that suggest you're not safe, that you're going to die, you're going to, so then you can collapse, so you have to be quite mindful about your relationship to what you're taking in, so you maintain a sense of cohesion and well-being and integrity of yourself. So samadhi, community, and then in terms of actually when you are feeling, for me, when I do feel like I have strength and focus, then I think two things. One is a really depth of equanimity, just to understand that, at some level, these beings they're representing a force. So when I see that and they're unconscious, they're ignorant, I can actually have compassion for them. I can have some moments of compassion for them stuck in that. And I also think, the karma they're ratcheting up is not great, that they're closing their hearts. In terms of, the word is quite a difficult word to use, but in terms of the depth of the closeness of their being, it's going to be a very long journey for them to open up out of that. And then to look at it more impersonally, like I meditate, breathing with not so much the beings themselves, but the energetics of what they represent, like the Tonglen, just breathing with that. And I very much feel what that depth of hatred and divisiveness and destruction, it's very intimate. I can feel it.
Mm.
And then I breathe with that, and then just extend from the mind, the pure mind, which we have access to in meditation. The radiant citta heart has light. You're just sending light through that energy across the planet, and just, extending it through those forms and those structures. And I believe that's also very powerful. I also have a prayerful practice around Kuan Yin, around saints and sages. And I do call on them, and that is part of the Buddha Dharma, is the invoking of devas and earth spirits and protective beings that for me are very real and have been had very miraculous responses in our life, and at times of great danger. So it's a very, like when I was at Standing Rock last year, the whole response of the Lakota and the Sioux and the Dakota peoples, and all of the nations, First Nations people of the original land here in America, came together to respond to this unbelievable abusive outrage being generated against their water and their land, this sort of extraction industry, oil industry, that they were very, very clear that this is a non-violent response, and it's deeply, deeply rooted in ceremonial, sacred prayer. And so every morning they would, we had about 2,000 people the time I was there in a circle, and freezing. I was in North Dakota in November. My God, it was freezing. But standing in this circle for a few hours, everyone be smudged, and then the elders speaking and doing prayers in silence, and walking to the river, the Missouri River, and then more prayers. And it was extremely moving. And then just talking and reminding people again and again, this is where we come from. This is our strength. And as soon as you move into violence, you're not going to win on that level anyway. They got it covered, So that isn't the level that we come from. And this is our strength. This is what we're training in as Dharma practitioners. We train in the power, a different kind of power. It's not the power of politics. It's not the power of violence. It's not the power of power over. It's a very different power.
So you're aligning with the forces of goodness and truth, and drawing your power from that connection to what is good and pure.
What is deeply, in the deepest intelligence of the earth is alive. The earth is a living being. The deepest intelligence, the indigenous people really exemplify a relationship with the cosmos, the earth, with animals, with all beings. Was a lived, intimate relationship in terms of not objectifying. It's not like holding things as an object that we can then, we control, or we do something, or we extract, or we get something from. But it's actually, even the word in the native language for an animal is a relative. It's a different relationship. So it's calling on the protection, yes, from what we traditionally think of as the divine, but even in the Parita chant, the blessing protection chants that the Buddha taught, the very opening invocation is also to the spirits of the land, the yakas, the nagas, of the waters, of the so the sense that the living sacredness of the earth and the land and the trees and the spirits, and that this kind of feeling about life, that it's what we live in is a desacralized world. From our body, from every aspects of our life, to our sexuality, to the land, to our relationships. And it's the reclamation of the sacred that is, that was exemplified for me. It's a work I think we need to do, but it was exemplified through these gestures that happened, and this extraordinary standing up that happened at Standing Rock.
you're just reminding me that one way the word dharma is used is just the nature of things and nature, and that nature itself, there's a harmony and a goodness in nature. So to take refuge in the Dharma is also to take refuge in nature,
exactly,
and in the mysterious harmony of and understanding of the interconnectedness, and just to align yourself with the forces of the earth. You're tuning into a deeper kind of power than what's my small mind or my aching heart going to respond.
Yeah, and she's in charge.
She's showing us. Yeah,
we actually are. I say the Earth's in charge, but we are actually changing the Earth. Obviously, we're changing, but ultimately, what, 4.5 billion years, and we've been here for about 3 seconds. The odds aren't good. We think we're going to take. I mean, this is an old story, like in the 1700s, at the rise of the Enlightenment. The idea of torturing the secrets out of nature. This has been our relationship. That it's there just for us to extract. And while I think technology is going to have a great impact on our new world emerging, because there is a new world emerging in the midst of all of this, it's not going to be enough unless our consciousness changes, unless our relationship changes, to our environment and everything else, our bodies, each other. So this is the work as Dharma practitioners, I think, that we're primed for. Really, this is our territory,
and maybe how we're agents of this process of greater consciousness, along with the deepening of the forces of greed, hatred, and delusion. That we are both the perpetrators and the saviors of fighting for the earth, or maybe standing up for the earth, as you say.
Yeah, we're part of what's contributed to it, and we're also part of what's awakening out of the systems that have contributed. So it's very humbling. We can't stand on our righteous kind of soapbox, because I fly, I drive. I don't like to, but I would rather not. But the reality is that I've lived heedlessly. I still do. I try not to. I'm trying to more and more clean up my act and so on.
Actually, that one of the things I was curious about, how do you become more conscious to your blind spots in standing up for what's right? It's really humbling, as you say, to see how we contribute as well. How does it work for you?
It's I think it's the function of, in the Buddhist language, the conscience, the hiriotapa function of feeling. You feel when you're out of harmony, that slight burn when you feel, oh, that wasn't good, or I should, I think it's a guide. They also call it the guardians of the world, that functioning of conscience, that which guards the world. In inner world, psychologically, and outer world, the cohesion of society. And that, I do believe, is it's part of the Dharma realm as well. And it's a living, wise function. And so it's attuning to that. And, one of the disciplines I've been working towards for a long time was to clean up my diet. I've been a vegetarian for a long time, but I've also known the terrible travesty of all animal industries, really, and so to the point where eventually I was able to make that shift, to move to a plant-based diet and really be very careful about what I ingest, first of all, into this body. in terms of sugars and caffeines. And, you know, it's also partly a function of an aging body that it's not doesn't bounce so back from abuse. But also I really felt so profoundly that I have no right to use these animals, you know, for any product. And I could see the part of me, the battle against the tongue and the habit, you know, the justification, you know, this growing thing that's like, you know, you've got to stop this activity. And then there's the way the mind justifies. And in the end, you know, it was like, you know, you've got to be more real and take a stand. And I can see it with flying, which is difficult in America because there's no high-speed transport. It's a very vast country. But I'm also now working on really trying to cut that down and looking at the use of oil. And I think it's just a question of being willing to feel and be very honest internally about what we're engaging in and how we justify what we engage in, and to question that and to see where we can really start to hone our life more and more personally. It doesn't mean to get on a soapbox and start ranting at everyone else, but you know, but it is humbling, but it is quite hard to just to stand up for these things, and yet one's personal life is out of accord. So you know, it's a process. You know, it's a process too, and it's also time and place. Like, it's much easier for me to do a plant-based diet, vegan diet, living in Sebastopol than when working in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. You know, sometimes it's just quite hard in the circumstances you're in when there's absolutely no accommodation. And, you know, so sometimes it's time and place and circumstance, but I can't really have an excuse. And I'm living in this sort of heavenly realm of organic foods.
And it's really inspiring to hear you having that commitment to where you see there's a possibility of changing habits that you're actively committing to do your best in that. So, and we should probably end soon, but I wanted to just ask any particular issues for you that are most significant and concerning, or that you're engaging your practice in the world?
Well, at the moment, I think the focus on the animal industries has been one of the biggest ones for me, because I really feel very deeply for the terrible abuse that they're experiencing at our hands. And, you know, that goes from the big agro farms and the huge terrors of those places to the wild animals that are being lost at great speed in in the continent of Africa, and the hunting industry, and so I feel a lot of pain, really, because I feel the animals are innocent. They're really being decimated because of us, you know, because of our greed and unconsciousness and perversions. So that's one that I always try and respond to, whether it's petitions, whether it's donations, whether it's, you know, my personal life, whether it's writing articles and so on. Of course, women's issues and you know, children and marginalized peoples, indigenous peoples are also things that move me very much as issues. And, you know, and then the forest, the Amazon, you know, the loss of the fight, you know, there's so many environmental activists that are being murdered actually across the planet now. It's one of the, you know, it's shocking, the numbers of activists, and often they are in very you know, indigenous peoples, or they're marginalized peoples, or they're trying to fight for their lands. And I know the products I'm using are a direct result of their loss of, you know, they contribute to their struggle. You know, if I'm not conscious, I'm trying to be much more conscious about what I'm buying and consuming and so on. and also the political level. And I feel that really, we should be continuing to challenge, to call senators. There's a great app called 5 Calls. You can download it on your iPhone.
5 calls?
5 calls, and it gives you each day you can make calls. It gives you the number, it gives you you can choose between different causes. It downloads, whether it's Puerto Rico or whether it's the fires of Sonoma or whether it's the gun lobby or the NRA and so on and so on. So I think, and of course, being a UK citizen, I also am part of the Green Party and also sign petitions and things there, and also in South Africa with particularly with the animal situation or other situations. So I think getting involved at that level, not to feel that you're just powerless, that actually we as citizens should be the ones holding the power, and these people are holding political office are our servants and not the other way around.
That sounds like that keeps you busy just with those.
Yeah, it's not, I can't do it all the time, but I try every day to sign some petitions or make a call or something. But also focalizing. This is why we want to actually, we're at a position now in our lives where we want to offer this training transmission around depth Dharma, focusing primarily on shift of consciousness, response from the depth consciousness.
That Sacred Mountain.
Yeah, Sacred Mountain Sangha. And that will be, people, we'll put that out more in the next few months, so that we can help support a growth of leaders, teachers, healers, responders for, I think, what is going to be increasingly chaotic and challenging times. I think this idea that we're going to snap back to what it was is probably, I hope that we do that, but I have the feeling that we're actually in for even more rocky times.
So that that leads me to the last thing I wanted to invite you to share, and that is, what is your most positive vision for the future? Because it seems to me that the more we can hold some possibility and some vision, the more others can share that with us, and rather than just see it all as hopeless and gloom and doom. So.
I don't see it as hopeless, but I don't want to be Pollyannish about the times we're in need and pretend that.
Definitely.
But I don't know. I mean, it's like I do not know what's going to happen, and that's the most real thing I can say. But I feel, it's like a heartbeat. It's like I feel a deep sense of trust and belief, faith to an evolutionary process. And what I'm looking at is the sort of the failure of deep systems of empire, of capitalism, of power over, and I believe they are going to fall. We're seeing them rise up like an old dinosaur with tremendous ferocity, and they're going. And I have no doubt they're going to damage a lot. But underneath that, like you look at them, some of the millennials and the brilliance and some of the innovation that's happening and the brilliance of it, and some of the collaborative kind of creative endeavors to, there's like definitely a new world emerging. Some of the consciousness and awareness that's growing, and all of that is going to translate into a new. We're midwifing a new world. There's no doubt in my mind that we're midwifing a new world. It might take 100 years. I don't know if we've got that long, and it might include a lot of damage on the way. But every shift, this is a profound shift of evolutionary consciousness that we're working into. It doesn't happen without, near-on disaster happening as a heralding it in, So I have faith in the process. It's like when you're in therapy, when I used to work as a therapist, sometimes it looks the worst before a shift of healing happens.
Yeah, I love that Andrew Harvey, the way he holds it, that just like the the dark night of the soul and the spiritual journey, that we're in a dark night of the species that leads to awakening eventually, and it's usually suffering that wakes us up.
I couldn't say it better than Andrew. He's brilliant. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that, yeah, there's the way I see it. We will wake up sooner or later, because this is an unsustainable.
We're being forced to wake up now.
Yeah,
we're being forced to. We're being shaken. Look what just happened in Santa Rosa. I mean, this whole area, our beautiful Angela Center burned down. I mean, this is personal now. It's not like over there in some. It's like, this is the insight community that got completely slammed, and just up the road from Spirit Rock. So we are being shaken awake. There's only places we can only step into this heart, and join together. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know where it go for us, but there's a lot of beauty in holding that faith to that heart.
Yeah, and that we might be on the, we're swimming and immersed in consciousness, so it's we might be waiting in the wings and saying, "Come on, everybody!" and the people, everybody get together, and like the old song, but sooner or later, even those who are not Dharma practitioners will be forced to wake up. And the way I see it, it's, there'll be the system needs to reboot, and the planet and the human experiment needs to reboot, because it's unsustainable. And since we're going to wake up sooner or later, that to do everything we can to make it on the sooner side, so that there's less dukkha in the
we can't dilly-dally. It's not the time for dilly-dally. There's a lot at stake.
Mm-hmm. No time to lose, as Pema Chodron says. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your commitment and dedication, and your love for.
You're so welcome, and thank you for hosting this platform and thinking about how to continue the conversation and take it out there and encourage us all. It's a great act of the Bodhisattva heart, James, and I appreciate it.
Back at you. And good luck with the Sacred Mountain Sangha. And,
thanks a lot.
And people can check out at Dharmagiri.
Well, they can sign on to our newsletter, and then through that we'll keep you posted.
Mm-hmm. That's through the Dharmagiri.
Yeah, through the portal of the Dharmagiri website. Mm-hmm. At the bottom of the homepage, there's a newsletter to sign on.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
And
good to be traveling this with you.
Likewise. Take care.
Be well. Bye.
Bye.